Everything seems calm in a tropical forest, when in fact an all-out fight is being waged by two great empires, plants and insects. The opposing forces are formidable, pitting over 3/4 of all known life forms against each other. The insects attack on all fronts. The plants retaliate by poisoning their sap or, like this carnivorous pitcher plant, by turning the tables on the insects. For millions of years, the process of evolution has given rise to more and more specialized insects and plants which can no longer live without each other. A fascinating great alliance which would change the world. This morning, the supply boat S02E09 is carrying Uno Bizarro passenger down the Amazon. We left Iquitos a good 2 hours ago, and we're almost at our destination, the little Peruvian village of Palmeiras. It's no accident that this village bears the name of a tree. The forest surrounding Palmeiras is one of the richest in the world. The village leaders confirm that there are many insects in the great forest and show me the paths to take. There's no better place to start our study on insect-plant relations. We think that all insects originated from an animal looking like this millipede and which fed on vegetal debris. With such an ancestor, it's not a surprise if all primitive insects ate plants only. These vegetarians reigned supreme for millions of years, despite the appearance of many insect predators. Today, over 50% of all insect species still eat only plants. These primitive insects opened hostilities by developing pointed beaks that enable them to pump up sap, filter it, and extract nutrients. Leafhoppers and aphids still feed this way today. As plants diversified, new insects appeared, presenting ever bigger and better tools, such as mandibles for grinding plant tissue. Many insects focused their attacks on a single plant species. Today, their survival depends entirely on this one food source. For some insects, the sap of certain trees is mainly irresistible. And here is a good proof. You see, the sap oozing from this wounded tree attracted nearly all the harlequin beetles of this area. How did these big beetles find this damaged tree? Harlequin beetles are perfectly capable of flying, so they can patrol vast areas. But they did not locate their favorite tree with their eyes. Their powerful antenna detected the subtle scent emitted by the sap from far away. When the damaged tree is a species that harlequins especially like, a huge crowd of these beetles will converge on it. The males take advantage of the occasion to court the females and mate with them. Insects had become a formidable army that could detect and exploit the slightest weakness of a plant. But the plants would fight back. To stave off attack by plant-eating insects, some plants developed mechanical barriers like thorns or sticky hairs. Others produced tough leaves with a waxy coating. But the decisive moment in the battle was when the plants invented the ultimate chemical weapon: poisonous sap. The sap of this deadly nightshade is so toxic that it is used to make one of the most potent poison, curare. Now, just look at these leaves. They have been eaten by a cricket. Toxic plants repel most insects, but there's always one little devil that develops a tolerance to the poison. This morning, I have a meeting with a butterfly and heliconid. It shouldn't be long. Oh, there it is. What did I tell you? Heliconid. But I confess, this butterfly didn't come here for me, but mainly because it was much interested by this plant, the passion vine. Don't be fooled by these pretty flowers. The leaves of this vine contain deadly cyanide. And yet, a heliconius caterpillar is feasting on them. Suicidal tendencies? On the contrary, survival tactics. As they evolved, these caterpillars became immune to the poison. They built up so much poison in their bodies that predators leave them alone. But one good turn deserves another. As adults, the butterflies collect pollen grains, fertilize the plant, and so help the passion vine survive. Obviously, the plant does not let the caterpillars destroy it completely. It has devised intriguing ways to control their population. Some butterflies, for example, avoid laying their eggs on a leaf where other eggs are already glued. Through one of those amazing little tricks of evolution, passion vines have come to produce little protrusions that look exactly like heliconid eggs and fool the butterflies. The passion vine has another defense system. If you look closely, you will see an army of tiny mercenaries, ants. These ants patrol the surface of the leaves, chasing away intruders and attacking the caterpillars as soon as they hatch from the egg. The plant rewards its defenders by producing a delicious sweet liquid. Thus opened a new chapter in insect-plant relations. In some cases, yesterday's enemies became today's allies. As we travel down this river, we will also travel back in time to the origins of the great alliance between plants and insects. Why are flowers so beautiful? To inspire the poets? Or help us win the heart of a loved one? Not at all. Flowers have only one purpose in life: seduce insects. The flower is a reproductive organ which operates in a very simple manner. A tiny grain of pollen is emitted and must land on another flower of the same species over a distance of hundreds of yards. A pretty random strategy for a life form that is unable to move. Fortunately, the flower is also a sophisticated marketing tool. It is able to entrust this delicate mission to the cleverest and most diligent messenger in the world, an insect. The first insects to sign a mutual assistance pact were probably the sturdy beetles, well before the arrival of more refined pollinators like butterflies and bees. Even today, some primitive plants like the giant Amazonica water lilies count on their traditional allies to transport their pollen. This flower is a beetle prison. But don't worry, the inmates are pretty well treated. They have plenty to eat, live in heated cell, and better, they are released after 24 hours. The prisoners trapped at the bottom of these flowers are Cyclocephala, little brown beetles of the scarab family. At nightfall, the Amazonica flower opens. The temperature inside the flower rises several degrees to speed the evaporation of a powerful fragrance that has an irresistible attraction for these beetles. The insects enter the flower, which then closes around them. All day, they crawl around inside the flower, feeding on the sticky protein-rich parts. Their bodies become sticky, and soon they are covered with pollen grains. At nightfall the next day, the flower opens again, freeing the pollen-laden beetle, which immediately flies off to find another flowering water lily. Then the cycle begins again, with the beetles finding food and shelter, and the plant obtaining the precious pollen grain it needs for fertilization. The fertilized flower stops emitting fragrance. It turns purple and disappears underwater, soon to re-emerge and open into a gorgeous giant water lily. This is how plants and insects began forming the first alliances. And these will lead to the evolution of even more efficient and sophisticated insects. Over millions of years, the relationships between plants and insects have become more and more specialized. To ensure the loyalty of their pollinators, some flowers begin to provide them with fuel by producing a sweet, high-energy liquid, nectar. No foods themselves, butterflies developed a proboscis that allowed them to drink this nectar. Wanting to give precedence to their most efficient messengers, some plants hid their nectar in deep cups. Now, only the Sphinx moth could take advantage of these flowers' generosity. The elongated mouth parts of the Sphinx moth and the deep flowers they prefer didn't just appear overnight. Every generation, minute changes occur, continuously refining the relationship between one species of insects and plant. Some plants began to produce large quantities of pollen, and so bees developed little sacs on their legs to help them collect it. Some plants changed the structure of their flowers to provide landing platforms for the bees, and even colored lines to guide them to the center of the flower and the pollen. There are plants that seem to have an ongoing dialogue with their pollinators. Once fertilized, the flower changes from mauve to white, telling the bees not to waste their time. This flower does the same thing, only with red and orange. The tropical forest is a vast labyrinth where two plants of the same species may be growing hundreds of yards apart. The situation is particularly critical for rare plants like orchids. Luckily, these plants struck a lifetime deal with the world's top pollinating insect. These are orchid bees, shiny, sturdy, and tireless, and some of which can live up to 6 months. The males spend their entire lives shuttling from one orchid to another. With this trap, I will try to catch some orchid bees. They are the most sophisticated pollinating insects. In fact, they are not attracted by nectar, but mainly by specific odors that entomologists have succeeded in synthesizing. Orchids have linked their survival directly to the bees' survival. Without their fragrances, the male bees cannot mate. The more fragrances a male collects, the more he proves his worth and experience to female. The champions can accumulate up to 100 different fragrant substances. Only a few drop, and we're in business. Be patient. Only a minute later, the first males arrive to collect the fragrant liquid in little sacs on their hind legs, which act like sponges. Just look at all these perfume addicts. Orchids produce these substances to force the bees to transport their pollen. Their flowers hide clever mechanisms that stick little lumps of pollen on the visitors. They are the two yellow balls we see on the back of this male. Over 80% of flowering plants now depend entirely on insects for their pollination. But there are even more surprising mutual coexistence facts. Here's a tree that looks as if it's being cared for by a gardener, or should I say, thousands of gardeners. It's a Cecropia, and the gardeners are Azteca ants. At the slightest vibration, hundreds of these ants appear as if by magic. No wonder their colony is located right inside the hollow branches. The Aztecas defend their tree fiercely against termites or anything else that might hinder the Cecropia's growth. Let's see how the ants react if I tie a small fragment of moss onto this branch. The Aztecas immediately swarm all over this unidentified object. They will gnaw at it and cut it into pieces until there's nothing left of it. Nor do the ants give any vine or other parasite plant a chance to take root on their host. The slightest suspicious growth is immediately torn to shreds. Ants are so important to the Cecropia tree that it even feeds them. You see here, at the base of each leaf, tiny protein-rich grains are produced, which ants collect immediately. These grains have no other purpose than to feed the ants, which tuck them away in tiny storerooms in the tree trunk. The Cecropia even allows the ants' herds of aphids to suck its lifeblood. The aphids are not strong enough to pierce the bark of the tree, so the ants place them on the tender inner walls of branches. Here they can suck up the sap with their little pointed beaks and produce drops of sweet liquid the Azteca find very appetizing. Aztecas can only establish their colonies in Cecropia. Without those hands, the Cecropia tree is immediately attacked by plant eaters. This is one of the most remarkable pack of mutually assured survival between plants and insects. Ultimately, we are all parasites of plants, but it's the insects that have gained the most from their alliance with plants. They have become the most diversified of all the animals, which has given them a clear advantage in the great game of survival.